The queen who went to war pregnant. The untold story of Boudica imagined giving birth, then waging war against the mightiest empire the world had ever known. That's exactly what one woman did. Her name was Boudica, and the Romans would never forget it. Like, subscribe, and follow Utak Diaries for the most insane, untold stories from history. In ancient Britain's misty highlands, where oak groves whispered secrets in stone circles marked sacred ground, lived a queen whose name would strike terror into Roman hearts. Boudica ruled the Iceni tribe in eastern Britain. Tall as a warrior's spear, with flowing copper hair and eyes that burned with fierce pride, the Iceni were proud, independent, and fiercely protective of their traditions. Unlike many tribes, they allowed women to hold real power, to own property, and even rule as queens. Boudica had married King Prothotagus, building a kingdom that balanced old Celtic ways with harsh new realities. For Rome had come to Britain. Under Emperor Claudius, Roman legions had crossed the Channel and planted their eagles in British soil. The conquest was swift and brutal in some places, diplomatic in others. The Romans understood that ruling conquered peoples required more than military might. It required a delicate balance of force and cooperation through client kings. King Prothotagus made this difficult choice. Rather than face immediate destruction, he became a Roman client king, maintaining authority over the Iceni while acknowledging Roman supremacy. It was a compromise that allowed his people to keep their customs, language, and traditional way of life, for now. But Prothotagus was no fool. He understood that client kingdoms were often absorbed when their rulers died. As he aged, he worried about his family's future and drafted a will dividing his wealth between his two daughters and the Roman emperor himself, hoping this would satisfy Roman demands while preserving Iceni dignity. When Prothotagus died, his carefully crafted plan immediately unraveled. The Romans saw his will not as respectful cooperation, but as weakness and opportunity for exploitation. Rome moved with cold efficiency. Roman procurator Quintus Decianus led the charge, a bureaucrat whose loyalty was measured in gold flowing to the imperial treasury. To him, the Iceni were resources to be harvested, not people with rights. The Romans seized Iceni lands that had been tribal property for generations. Ancient boundaries were erased. Farms that had fed families for centuries became Roman estates. Sacred groves were marked for clearing. Roman soldiers and tax collectors swept through settlements like locusts, confiscating gold torques, silver cups, bronze mirrors, family heirlooms passed down through generations. Then came the ultimate humiliation. Queen Boudica was summoned before Roman officials. Perhaps she expected negotiation, hoped her status as queen and mother would afford some respect. She was catastrophically wrong. In front of her own people, Queen Boudica was stripped and flogged like a common criminal. Each lash was designed not just to cause pain, but to demonstrate Roman power and Celtic powerlessness. But the Romans weren't finished. In an act violating every code of honor, Roman soldiers raped Boudica's daughters to Rome. This brutal display was meant as a warning to other tribes. But to Boudica, this was a declaration of war. Here lies the most remarkable aspect of her story. Historians believe she was either heavily pregnant or had recently given birth when these atrocities occurred. Imagine the physical and emotional state of a woman who had just endured childbirth. Suddenly faced with her world's destruction, rather than breaking her spirit, these atrocities forged it into something harder than Roman steel. The queen who had sought peace was dead, killed by Roman brutality. In her place stood something far more dangerous, a mother's fury unleashed upon the world. Boudica didn't just protest Roman brutality. She raised an army that would shake the empire's foundations. Word of the atrocities spread like wildfire through Celtic tribes. The story became a symbol of everything wrong with foreign domination. But Boudica understood rage alone wasn't enough. She needed to channel fury into organized resistance. Her first allies were the Iceni, who needed no convincing, but she found willing partners among the Trinovantes, whose capital, Camulodunum, had been transformed into a Roman colony with veterans given Celtic lands. The Trinovantes brought warriors and crucial intelligence about Roman settlements and defenses. Boudica's genius lay in tapping into something deeper than tribal politics. She understood that Celtic peoples shared common identity, transcending boundaries, similar gods, customs, and values. Most importantly, they shared growing awareness that Roman rule threatened their very way of life. Her message was simple but powerful. This wasn't just about avenging wrongs to one family, but about Celtic Britain's survival. The Romans had shown their true nature. They wanted total domination and cultural extinction. The army that gathered around Boudica was unprecedented. Ancient sources suggested numbered over 100,000 warriors from tribes across Britain. These weren't professional soldiers, but farmers, herders, craftsmen, and nobles who had taken up ancestral weapons to defend their homeland. Armed with swords, spears, and unbreakable rage, they had one goal: burn Rome out of Britain. Their first target was carefully chosen: Camulodunum, the first Roman capital and symbol of conquest. Here stood the great temple to deify Emperor Claudius, proclaiming Roman power to all who saw it. The attack was swift and merciless. Roman settlers, grown complacent, were caught completely off guard. The city's walls crumbled before Celtic fury. Roman statues were smashed. The temple burned to the ground. The destruction was total and deliberate. Not random violence, but calculated warfare designed to erase every trace of Roman presence. From Camulodunum, Boudica's army moved to Landinum, the economic heart of Roman Britain. Governor Suetonius Paulinus, campaigning in Wales, abandoned the city rather than sacrificed his army. Londinium burned as thoroughly as Camulodunum. The third target, Verulamium, fell and burned likewise. This wasn't just rebellion, but scorched earth campaign designed to make Roman rule impossible. By destroying infrastructure of administration and commerce, Boudica struck at imperial power's foundations. She understood Rome's strength lay not just in legions, but in complex systems binding the empire together. Historians estimate 70,000–80,000 Romans and allies died in her campaign. Staggering numbers that shook the empire. What made these victories remarkable was that Boudica achieved them without siege engines or professional apparatus Romans took for granted. She had taken fortified cities through sheer force of numbers and will. Behind the flames stood a woman whose existence challenged everything Romans believed about power and leadership. Roman sources describe Boudica as exceptionally tall, with fierce countenance and piercing gaze. Her voice carried across battlefields with thunderous authority. But it was her legendary flowing red-gold hair that became her banner, reaching to her waist. Often in elaborate braids, both practical for warfare and symbolic of Celtic heritage. She rode into battle in a chariot with her daughters beside her, making powerful statements about Celtic values and the society she fought to preserve. To followers, she represented everything they fought for: Celtic women's strength, family bonds, ancient traditions Rome sought to destroy. To enemies, she represented their worst fears: women who refused to know their place, traditions challenging Roman assumptions about civilization. But Boudica was more than symbol. She was skilled politician and military leader who built and maintained the complex coalition making rebellion possible. Her speeches revealed a leader who understood how to inspire diverse audiences. Speaking to warriors about honor, mothers about protecting children, nobles about preserving privileges. She demonstrated remarkable strategic thinking, avoiding pitched battles where Roman discipline would dominate, instead targeting cities and settlements to strike at administrative foundations while conducting psychological warfare. The complete destruction of Roman settlements sent messages far beyond military victory. Most importantly, Boudica proved the Roman narrative of inevitable conquest was a lie. Here was a woman who had initially tried working within the system, accepting client status and seeking accommodation. Romans had responded with brutality, revealing their civilization's true nature. Her very existence as successful military leader challenged Roman assumptions about gender, race, and cultural superiority. She was clearly a woman, mother, someone caring about family and tradition, yet also a formidable commander who had outfought Rome's best generals. But Rome was not an empire that accepted defeat. General Suetonius Paulinus found himself in an impossible position, forced to abandon campaigns in Wales to face this unprecedented threat. Paulinus gathered forces from across Roman Britain, core legions of professional soldiers who had served from Rhine to Euphrates. But he knew discipline and experience might not be enough against a Celtic army numbering perhaps 200,000. Romans would have to rely on superior tactics and coordination. The battle location remains mysterious. Somewhere along Watling Street, Paulinus chose to reign carefully, a narrow valley with woods protecting flanks and rear, preventing Boudica's vast army from using numbers to surround Romans. Celts would be forced to attack frontally into Roman defensive formations. The Roman battle line was military engineering masterpiece. Front ranks of legionaries with short swords, large shields, and javelins. Behind them, auxiliary troops. On flanks, cavalry ready to exploit breakthroughs. They had fought together for years, developing coordination that only comes from shared experience. As armies faced each other, the contrast was stark. Disciplined Roman ranks, armor gleaming, standards marking formations, professional silence. Against them surged vast Celtic hosts, war cries echoing, colorful shields, creating tapestry of tribal identity and ancient pride. Boudica stood at her army's front, in her war chariot with daughters beside her, face painted with blue woad, red hair streaming like battle banner. Before fighting began, she addressed her troops. "I am resolved on victory or death. As for men, they may live or die as they will. But I, a woman, will not live to be enslaved." These words captured the rebellion's essence. Not just political struggle but fight for Celtic Britain's soul. Some things were more important than life itself. The battle was brutal and decisive. Celts attacked with fury that had carried them to previous victories, charging up the slope toward Roman lines. For a moment, numbers and determination seemed sufficient, but Romans held their front ranks, absorbed the Celtic charge. Shields locked in testudo formation that had broken attacks from Britain to Mesopotamia. Legionaries fought with mechanical precision, their discipline holding even as warriors fell around them. The Celtic charge broke against Roman steel and discipline. What followed was massacre. Minus 80,000 Celts died according to Roman accounts, while Romans lost only 400. Boudica's great army was destroyed, her rebellion crushed. Rather than face capture and the humiliation that would follow, Boudica chose death on her own terms. Some sources say she took poison. Others suggest she died of illness or wounds. What matters is that she died free, never bowing to Roman authority. Her rebellion had failed, but her legend was born. She had shown that Rome could be beaten, that Roman civilization could be destroyed, that Roman power was not eternal. In 3 months, A grieving mother had burned 3 Roman cities and killed 80,000 Romans, achievements that would inspire rebels for millennia. The queen who went to war, pregnant, had become immortal, proving that even the mightiest empires could not completely suppress the human desire for freedom and dignity. Her story echoes through history. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from those who win, but from those who dare to fight against impossible odds. Boudica's name means victory in Celtic, and though she died in defeat, her spirit of resistance achieved the most important victory of all. It could never be conquered. Boudica fought an empire while healing from childbirth, while her daughter stood beside her in war, while carrying the weight of an entire people's revenge. If you think her story deserves a place in every classroom, like, share, and subscribe. Because Utak Diaries doesn't just tell history, we uncover the warriors they tried to erase.